Speaking of a bunch of miserable showbiz assholes being mean to each other, um, the Broadway melody.
The Broadway melody.
The Broadway melody.
MGM's first all-talking picture.
All talking, all singing, all dancing. First Sound Academy Award Best Picture winner. Often said online as the worst Best Picture winner.
I haven't seen them all, but boy howdy, this one makes a case for it. Because this movie is terrible. Yeah. This movie's real bad. It is a similar kind of like showbiz. Well, this movie's billed as a comedy, and it is. I don't think it's ever funny.
No.
And it is fairly exemplary of. I mean, this is our first episode talking about all talking pictures, right? Like we've really only covered The Jazz Singer, which is like barely a talkie, right?
Yeah.
It has like 3 scenes of talking in it.
Yeah, and so this movie is like illustrative in the challenges that early talkies faced.
Yeah,
in
this
many
this
ways.
movie has like all of the pitfalls of early talkies. I mean, a thought that I had after watching this movie, and probably the next movie we'll talk about, is talkies were a mistake. Like there was such a significant shift between just the overall like language of the filmmaking of all the silent movies we've been watching and these early sound movies, where it's just like this, they immediately feel so much worse, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is the case every time they make some kind of technological leap, though. We've seen this time and time again, where it's like when they go up to feature films, the first movies are kind of bad because they don't know how to fill all of that time properly, you know?
Yeah.
With every like kind of major jump, it takes them a while to figure out how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And they certainly have not figured it out yet with this movie. I guess the broad strokes of this is it follows 2 sisters, the Mahoney sisters, Harriet, who goes by Hank, and Queenie, who are like moving to New York to follow their showbiz dreams.
And guess what? There's a love triangle.
Yep. And it's just a terrible one, though, where it's just like...
Yeah.
The only positive scenario to come out... Possible positive scenario is that the Mahoney sisters leave this asshole behind and, like, go off on their own again at the end. And that's not what happens at all.
He is so inexplicably shitty of a person.
Terrible.
I don't understand.
He is mean to everyone he meets. He is incredibly selfish and just a huge asshole and is bad at everything he does. I don't understand why anyone in this movie puts up with him.
But like he's supposed to be like the romantic lead. I don't think it.
Yeah,
like, there are parts.
No, he's
where
not.
The
he's
movie...
not supposed to be. Like the filmmakers not intend for him to be this unlikable. You know, even though he is.
He is so awful.
He's the worst. Eddie Kearns is the name of the male lead of this movie, and is a terrible character. Mm-hmm. One, because he is terrible to the people around him, but also just like he does not fulfill the function that he is meant to in this movie, which is to be a like charming romantic lead. He's the least charming human being alive.
So the broad strokes of this movie, they're 2 sisters who have a vaudeville act. They're trying to bring it to Broadway. They kind of have a relationship with this guy Eddie, who has recently landed the kind of a big role, a big kind of main role in a Broadway review, and he says that you will, he'll help them out by getting in the review and getting them jobs and everything.
Yeah. I'll put in a good word. I'll get you hooked up.
And they say it by talking. Whoa.
Yeah. Whoa, talking. Which is like, well, we'll talk about that in a second. The Broadway show that is depicted in this movie is the Zanfield Dollies, which is the worst thinly veiled
Ziegfeld Follies.
Yeah. So it's like Mr. Zanfield, and it's like, I wonder who that is supposed to be. There's a few of those in this movie. There's also one of the kind of like villains of the movie is named Jacques Warrener, which is very close to Jack Warner, which feels very pointed from an MGM picture. But yeah, there's a lot of talking, a lot of singing in this movie.
And a lot of dancing.
None of it particularly good. Like, this isn't the worst offender of this, I think, but there are a lot of scenes that are just like, and now we're going to stop everything, and someone's going to sing a song. Or someone's going to, like, play an instrument, and we're going to look at this. And I think this movie kind of justifies it by it being a bad Broadway show. So a lot of the musical numbers are sort of diegetic. They're within the world of the film. The characters are actually, like, performing musical numbers to each other as part of a show.
But then sometimes they are singing as if it's a musical, and then there's non-diegetic music playing behind them as well.
Yes. So it's sort of a mix of both.
Yeah.
I feel like I could spend this whole time just talking about what a jerk Eddie is in this movie. That's like most of my notes are that. Everyone who works on this Broadway show seems to hate each other. Everyone is like literally about to murder each other. There's one of the like tech guys throws a light off a scaffolding at one of the actors, and I'm like, that would kill someone. To throw this like massive metal light that then shatters onto the floor.
They're also like snippy and catty and mean to each other at all moments. Like every moment of this movie is just like cattiness.
Yeah, but then like I feel like the overall impression isn't that like, I don't feel like this movie is trying to posit that like Broadway shows are a terrible place to be.
I think what it's trying to be is like affably like mean, right? It's like people are mean, but you're having a fun time. It's like it's endearing, but it certainly is not.
Yeah, it is not remotely endearing. One thing that's kind of interesting about this movie is like it opens in a like a music studio for musicians. And it opens with this like overlapping cacophony of talking and music, which is kind of
a racket.
Right, but it is kind of like, hey, we can have talking and music in our movies now. Let's have like 8 people talking and singing in the first scene, all overlapping. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this movie ever really uses music or talking in a particularly interesting way. It just has a lot of it.
Which I mean is unique, right? It's much more dialogue driven than a silent movie could be. I believe there was a silent version of this, but but also the talking isn't really doing that much, you know. They're not really saying stuff. Like this is a story that could have been done in a silent movie.
Probably. One thing with it, I do think, like we were just saying before about like how it affects performance, is I think it makes performance a little bit harder to do. Like it raises the bar. Having sound in your movie means that like when your actors talk, they need to be able to deliver their dialogue in a believable fashion.
Yeah.
Which I feel like this movie does not do very well.
Yeah. At the beginning when I was watching this, I thought like, okay, like it, you know, it's not naturalistic certainly, but it's like a Broadway style overacting. And there's some of that. Like this kind of like talking to a big crowd as if, hey everybody, la, 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 you know? But my opinion went from this is Broadway style overacting and that's okay to this is actually bad acting.
Yeah. This isn't the sign of the times. This is just bad performance. My favorite scene in this movie is does not have very much dialogue in it. Surprise, surprise. It's like one of the few moments of like actual pathos or emotion I felt in this entire thing is maybe like 2/3 of the way through towards the end. So there's this love triangle between Eddie and the 2 sisters. Eddie is like initially involved with Hank, but is sort of like trying to seduce Queenie like behind her back the whole time. You know, a real charming, likable thing to do. And eventually that like it comes out and Hank reveals that she's known that for, you know, months or whatever. And she's like, she accuses Eddie of being a coward for not chasing after her sister that he's leaving her for. And so he storms out and she just breaks down crying in her dressing room. And that was like the one moment of like performance that I really felt was like,
yeah,
just her life is in shambles, right? Like her boyfriend has left her for her younger sister and like everything that she's like hoped and dreamed for is like falling apart. And she just like sits by herself and cries. And that I feel like was a genuinely good performance in that moment.
Yeah. And after Eddie leaves her, I think it's her uncle Jed, maybe, or even maybe it's Eddie, I don't remember, who says she's a born trooper. Troopers have no home. They're just tramps. So like, basically, like, there's this whole thing of it's just like Queenie is the pretty one, and and Hank is the one with business sense. They kind of look more or less the same to me, you know? But like everyone wants the pretty one, and she's like, I know I'm not the pretty one. I'm just destined to be a tramp the rest of my life.
Right, but the movie ends with her just like accepting that about herself, and like she's like, oh, everyone says that I'm only good at this one thing, so I'll just do that, I guess.
Yeah.
I hate the ending. The ending of this movie is awful, and is like just it is like the worst possible scenario. I feel like it's so I hate it. It like makes me angry.
Yeah, there's a point where it's talking about Hank, and then somebody says, those guys aren't gonna pay $10 to look at your face. Like, it's Broadway. Horrible. Yeah.
There's also a moment where Eddie starts a fight with Jacques over Queenie, and immediately gets his ass kicked and like thrown out of an apartment. And he's like, oh, you don't want anything to do with me. I'm no good. And I'm like, you are correct, sir. That is the one true thing you have said this whole movie. But so they end up getting married and moving to Long Island. And like Hank kind of starts her own traveling show with a new dancer that replaces Queenie, who then immediately starts flirting with Eddie when they meet. And it's just like, see, this is not going to end well for anyone. Like, this is just a cycle that's going to repeat. But the movie doesn't seem to acknowledge that whatsoever. And ends with Hank sort of going off to Peoria to do her show and saying, it's cream in the can, baby. Which I assume has some good connotation, but I have no idea what that means.
Oh, God, yeah, wait. I just wrote down another one of the mean things that was said. I know this is not related, but they're talking about, showing Hank's, profile, the side of her face. Someone says, your profile was ruined the day you were born.
Oh.
Horrible.
Horrible.
I keep looking at my notes and just, looking at all the heinous stuff that people said that I wrote down.
Yeah. Some other awful things that Eddie does is there's a bit right where they're talking about how Queenie is sort of going off on her own and getting involved in with men of low character or whatever, and Hank is like, hey, well, at least I still have you, to Eddie, and Eddie is like, bye. Immediately just leaves. And then later he's talking to Queenie and he says to her, whether you like me or hate me, you got to pay attention to me, which is some masculine bullshit right there. Yeah. That is so exemplary of male entitlement, I feel like.
The best thing about Eddie is that he has got an extremely New Yorkie accent. He says things like, certainly, and yes. He says, I'll sing you a voice.
Yeah. Maybe that's a good segue to our next movie, which is also a bad sound musical with a lot of New York accents in it. Unless you have something else to say.
The last stuff that I want to say a couple of things about just the way that having sound is affecting this movie, and the ways that in this movie in particular, more than the one we're about to talk about next, I think there are things that they just have not. Their minds are in a silent mode, and they haven't done. They're not doing talking properly. So in a silent movie, when people are having a dramatic moment, right? There's some dialogue, and then people are just kind of staring at each other with emotion on their face. And because it's silent, they can break time a little bit. You're just kind of imagining how the conversation would go. But what they're doing is just taking a moment to just hang on someone's face as they emote silently. And they do that a couple times in this movie, and it's so awkward because the conversation just stops to look at someone's face for a while.
Yeah, I did notice that. Like very weird pacing things where it's just like it will stop like mid scene just to like cut to people's faces, but not in a way that feels natural or
Yeah.
like it has any place there.
It's the kind of thing that would have been entirely acceptable in a silent movie, but when you're doing a movie with sound dialogue, the conversation has to flow naturally, and the cinematography has to follow. It has to be in service of a naturally flowing conversation, and in those instances, they're using an antiquated cinematography that did not quite match up.
It does almost feel like a lot of the filmmaking in this and the other early sound features feels like it's kind of going backwards. Like they need to simplify so much to accommodate for sound that it's like a lot of the actual filmmaking feels like it's regressed almost a little bit.
Sure, yeah. There are some at the very beginning. There are some like nice establishing like helicopter shots of
Probably
New York
airplane
City.
shots.
Maybe
Yeah.
airplane shots, but that's kind of the most adventurous
Yeah.
cinematography thing that happens this
Maybe
movie.
balloon or airship shots. Who's to say?
Yeah, Zeppelin. Another kind of remnant of silent filmmaking in this movie is that they're not using dialogue or kind of visual language to do establishing shots or that kind of thing. There are just title cards that say like a hotel on 42nd Street or 3 weeks
clunky.
later, right? Like, yeah. And so it's like they have not understood how to make a not silent movie yet, you know?
Right.
They're like, we don't know how to justify this transition in space without having a title card that's telling you what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
But then
that's
it's still
another
just
kind
like
of-
all the sound cuts out for those, and it's just like now an intertitle
yeah,
in a movie that doesn't need them. Yeah.
Another thing about the sound is that the mixing is awful, which
Well, yeah.
is to be expected in some ways, right? But you'd think that like they had a lot of trouble making this movie. They were figuring out how to make a sound movie while they were making it.
Yeah, they
And-
had to shoot a bunch of scenes more than once, I think, right? Just to like
Yeah, like
get the sound right.
their rushes
Not-
would come back and they'd go like, "Oh, this is crap. We got to do it
Right.
again." Basically.
Not like doing multiple takes like we would normally in a movie, but I mean like filming a scene, developing the film, getting it back the next day or days later and being like, "Oh, this is terrible. We got to redo this."
Yeah.
And doing that for almost every scene of the movie.
And so yeah, it makes sense. Although it's just you'd think that maybe I think it reached a low bar of acceptability of just how like cacophonous and poorly mixed the sound is. There's a part with tap dancing in this movie where the tap dancing is so quiet. It's focusing on these feet tap dancing for like a minute or a minute and a half, and it's just a whisper of every tap.
Yeah.
And then two other quick things about this movie are that their Uncle Jed, the sisters, have a kind of manager-esque of an uncle, and he does like a Porky Pig kind of routine.
Yeah, he has a stutter, like a very exaggerated, cartoony stutter.
But then he does the Porky Pig joke of like stuttering to say something and then saying like a kind of alternate version of that thing. I guess it's like a way that they're trying to use sound. It's like, here's a new joke that we can tell with sound. And then my last note is this and Pandora's Box both have some fairly explicit queer characters in them.
True. Yeah.
Pandora's Box, one of the characters who is wrapped into the obsession with Lulu is a woman, and she and she's kind of wealthy. She's the countess, I think, and then ends up kind of giving a lot of money and falling in with their disreputable gang for a while just because she's so obsessed with Lulu. And in this movie, there's a costume designer of the Broadway melody who he's like it's very specifically like we're like he's gay but we're not going to specifically say it, but they do all the like
Yeah.
right up
All
into
of the
saying it.
cliche sort of
Yeah.
mannerisms.
He's got limp wrists. He kind of talks in an effeminate way, but I think most notably, um, I think there's like a part where like their hats are not fit, like the dancers' hats are not fitting
Hmm.
through the doors, uh, and he's talking to the prop designer or the kind of set designer, and he says, "I designed the costumes for the shows, not the doors." And then she says, "I know that. If you had, they'd have been done in lavender." Which like that's right up until saying it. Oh yeah, so
Yeah.
people there's another part where he kind of like giggles a bunch and some people mock him giggling and call him a
Hmm.
cutie. Uh I mean, it's not the most positive representation of queer characters necessarily, but like
No.
it's not like hateful necessarily either. It's
I
just
mean,
kind of
it's kind of poking fun at
it's
that
mocking.
character a bit.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is somewhat mocking. I think the kind of depiction in Pandora's Box is less deliberately sort of mocking in that way. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think Lulu the character is kind of romantically linked to both men and women in the movie, just like Louise Brooks was in real life, even though she considered herself heterosexual, even though she had relationships with women a couple times in her life. Um, Whereas that at least feels like it's coming from a more sort of genuine place, I guess. Whereas this
Right.
feels more like it's sort of a joke for the joke's sake.
But I guess even like acknowledgement is kind of like this level of acknowledgement is fairly unprecedented.
True. Yeah. And I think both these movies are kind of examples of the era that we're in filmmaking now, which is pre-code. So it's like there is sound, but it's the Hays Code hasn't really started being enforced that much yet. So there's
Mm-hmm.
like a lot more kind of explicit references to sexuality and to crime and things like that that
Mm-hmm.
aren't, by like the mid 30s are going to get stripped away.